Welcome to the AWA Market Minute, breaking down current economic, financial, and political events that impact today's retirees. Our investment committee performs hours of research and analysis every month so that we can share simple summaries with our clients in 30 minutes or less. Featuring investment advisors Jaron Monk, Mason Page, Chief Investment Officer Scott Hoxer, and your host, founder and CEO Paul Coles.
Well, welcome everyone to this month's edition of our AWA Market Minute. I'm Paul Coles. With me as always is co-host Scott Hoxer. We're excited to be with you guys today to talk about a topic that's pretty near and dear to our hearts and very critical to everyone on this call's overall financial planning. Before we get into that, just want to make sure as a housekeeping item that everyone understands these calls are always designed to be educational and entertaining in nature. They're not designed to be specific advice for you, but rather to general advice on a broad audience level. So please don't take anything we say today and go act on it without first reaching out to your team here at Alliance Wealth Advisors one-on-one to talk through that situation specifically and uniquely to your needs. So before we introduce our guest host today, I wanted to start with just a quick story to kind of explain the beauty of this important tool that we use. Several months ago, earlier this year, met with an individual who'd gone through one of the most difficult challenges a family can go through, and that was the loss of her husband. And young family, she was in her mid-40s. Her husband tragically passed away while working, and they had two young daughters who were just in that stage of life where they're getting ready to go off to college and move into that next chapter of their lives. And this was a very, very painful loss because not only was their dad the breadwinner and financial support for the family, but the dad was also a companion and a best friend to these girls. It was a very emotional, difficult situation. Dad put himself in a position, however, where he had thought through a lot of the financial needs and the support that he needed to provide his family, even in the event he wouldn't be around. And as a result, he had this life insurance policy that he had purchased leading up, to just him building his 401k and other investment tools. When he passed away, this family tried to pick up the pieces and tried to move on. One of the things that these girls did well was they played volleyball, and it was not a cheap hobby. It wasn't a cheap sport. It was very expensive to travel and do these tournaments. And my client told me an experience where the daughter, shortly after dad had passed, struggled with the idea of continuing on. They decided to go play in this event, this tournament. And while at this tournament, the daughter played very, very well. In fact, it was a giant event with teams from all over the country, and she was able to play so well that she continued to advance. And the team that she played for played in the championship event. And at the end of this event, they won, and mom was just so proud and so happy. She ran down to the floor to embrace her daughter, and they sat and hugged and cried. And the mom pulled away and said, just as a second nature, said, "We need to call dad and tell him how well you did." And then they both realized in that moment that dad was gone. He'd been passed for several weeks. But the reality of his passing was still just settling in. She talked to me later about that moment, and she said, "I was so grateful that we had the life insurance money that we had to be able to afford to be at this volleyball tournament. Without that, I don't think my daughter would have had that moment where she could go out and shine and try to move on and put this tragedy and this terrible circumstance behind her." There's many, many people that have similar stories that we hear over the years of this career that are touched by life insurance and its ability to help, the financial element of emotional tragedy, like the loss of a loved one. So with that backdrop, I think we ought to introduce today's guest.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So awesome guest today. We've known this individual for a long time. We're pleased to welcome Eric Stuart. Eric is the vice president of life insurance distribution at Allegis Advisor Group, which is a large kind of insurance provider across many different states. And Eric brings 20 plus years of experience in the life insurance industry, has held a variety of roles with different organizations, anything from regional sales director to a producing agent, and really fortunate to have him. We've tapped into Eric many times over the years in complex life situations, and he's been an awesome resource. So with that, Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, we'll often see, and so Scott and I, we live in the investment world as well as obviously comprehensive planning requires a broad understanding of all these topics. But there are some individuals that, all they do is insurance work, and we'll often see, people that will promote, certain types of life insurance. How does somebody know what's a better type of policy for them?
Meeting with their advisor and finding out what the need is. There's many times that we'll look at policies where the need is death benefit only, but yet the advisor comes in wanting to sell cash value and death benefit. So you just got to know what the need is. If it's only for a temporary time, the most common policy that's sold is term insurance because it's for younger people, that's covering income, and or college education. The kids are young or what be it. So that's the need for them. There's no reason to sell a permanent policy if that's their only need. So that's, you just have to know the need of the client. I always suggest for clients to talk to their advisor to go over what their actual need is when it comes to insurance planning.
Eric, is maybe a follow-up to that. The demographic that we work a lot with are people who are at or near retirement, and in a lot of instances, the kind of primary needs for life insurance have been addressed. The kids are out of the house, the mortgage is paid, so there's not a big need there of life insurance to pay for that. But I know there's still, great application for life insurance for those types of individuals. Maybe walk us through, someone in that situation, no debt to cover, probably sufficient income to support the rest of their life, no kids to support. How can life insurance kind of fit into the planning in that type of situation?
Yeah, absolutely. The two most common purposes of life insurance in that situation. Number one would be legacy planning. Do you want to leave a legacy behind to your beneficiaries, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, charities, or what so be it? That's probably the number one reason why people buy permanent life insurance in the scenario that you said. The second reason would be estate planning. So if you have a large estate, where you're going to run into estate taxes, it's best to fund that with life insurance. To help pay for those taxes, because it's insurance. You're leveraging your dollars to get a higher benefit at some point in life. So large estate planning cases, life insurance is used often, and then legacy planning.
So I'll touch on that too, Eric, because I think this is a really great topic, especially for a lot of clients on the call. So there's various taxes that we might face, right? We're all familiar with income tax, where we have to pay tax back on income that we earn. There's also capital gains tax, which we would have to pay a portion of an appreciated asset's value. So if we invest in something and it grows beyond we've paid taxes on, that growth can be subject to a capital gains tax. One of the other taxes that we often don't think about a lot is estate tax, which would be, if we die and the government deems we have more than is, our fair share when we die, to hand that to the beneficiaries that follow. They could take a percentage of that portion by way of an estate tax, which is, one that today in 2023 isn't a super common problem for people because they've raised that estate tax exemption to be so high. Most people don't have a concern with that. However, it's been much lower, the exemption historically, and it's very possible in the future they reduce that exemption again, which would then, kind of expose a lot of people to a potential estate tax problem. So Eric, help me. Life insurance generally is not income taxable. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. and it's generally not capital gains taxable. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So could it be estate taxable?
It could be if it's not, so if life insurance, you pass on and life insurance just goes to your estate, absolutely it could. Most of the time when you do an estate planning, you're setting up an irrevocable life insurance trust, and the purpose of that trust is to get that money outside of your estate.
Okay.
So as long as it's properly structured, then it's not subject to the estate.
Perfect. So where we've seen this would be in a high net worth family that says, hey, we've got more money than would be eligible for the estate tax exemption. Therefore, we're going to be subject to some estate tax problems. And so if they can purchase life insurance, put that life insurance out of the estate, and the term you used was an irrevocable life insurance trust.
Correct.
So some kind of a trust vehicle where the life insurance then is owned by that trust, not by the estate, then we can have that bypass the estate tax and go directly to the kids, and then it's not income taxable. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. Right on. And one thing about estate tax, they raise it. Most people, like you said, aren't falling into that realm. It's just under 13 million, 12.96, I believe. And that's subject to going, to sunsetting back January 2026, back down to 5 million. Don't know if Congress will make, attempt to make changes to that or not, but it's something that might become more of an insurance estate planning tool, especially if it drops down to 5. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think another element to the estate planning conversation, and we do see this a lot also, is the idea of liquidity and equalization in an estate. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Life insurance is used, for many reasons. Just to kind of give you, when you say equalization or liquidity, but equalization, let's say you have a son and a daughter, you own a business, the son is going to inherit the business or take over the business because the daughter wants nothing to do with it. Many times people are buying life insurance to buy out the daughter, essentially, so the son can take it without any problems. The daughter will get paid out via life insurance. So that's equalization. That's done a lot. That's not the only example of equalization. That's a simple example to how that all works.
And then that makes sense, obviously, because if the estate value is, just to make our math easy, $10 million, and 8 million of that is the value of the business, and we're trying to equalize the gift to each child, but the son doesn't want to be beholden to his younger sister who has nothing to do with the business, but she now has, an equity stake in the business.
Yeah.
Then a life insurance policy could say, hey, each of you are going to get $8 million. You'll get the business. You'll get some life insurance.
Correct. And that is used all the time in planning, especially for business planning, when an owner of a business passes on and there's only one child or two children that want a desire to take on that business.
It's awesome.
So maybe kind of related topic, Eric. So as you get older, I know underwriting can become more difficult as all of us age. Our health eventually starts to take a little bit of a turn south. And how difficult is underwriting for someone who's in the kind of 60 to 65 or even late 50s? How difficult does underwriting become?
It's actually gotten a lot better over the years. Insurance carriers have adapted to longevity and life expectancy tables going up. If you're in standard health, not even preferred health, but just standard health with a few minor issues, high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, things like that, as long as it's well controlled, there's going to be no problem with underwriting. The issues we sometimes will have is if someone has diabetes and it's not well controlled, or a huge thing that comes up a lot is sleep apnea. For instance, this is just an example of underwriting. Sleep apnea 20 years ago would be hard to underwrite. Now you can get preferred best ratings, the best possible ratings on an insurance policy with sleep apnea, as long as it's mild and it's controlled. If it's uncontrolled and not compliant on doctor's recommendations, then that's when it's going to be tough to underwrite. But anything that's standard health with minor impairments, super easy to get through.
So let's say we've got some of our clients on the call today, and they've got some policies that they've held from, years back, and they say, this policy, I've just got it. It's been sitting in my junk drawer now for 15 years. What's the benefit of doing policy reviews to kind of dust those off and look at them?
I mean, to me, policy review is everything. The old policies that were purchased, however many years ago, insurance companies and the industry in general are making improvements to pricing, to policies, to designs, to guarantees. So it's always wise to look at old policies, whether it's term or permanent, doesn't matter, to see if that still fits the need. Sometimes, we review policies where the need is not there anymore. The kids are out of the house. They don't need the coverage. They don't want to leave a legacy behind, or they feel like they're leaving a legacy behind with their assets that they've accumulated over the years. And they just don't need it anymore. And we'll be the first ones that will say, hey, you probably don't need this anymore. And here's the options of getting out of it. But many times people still need the coverage, or they need more because they bought this policy 15 years ago. Things in their life has changed and they need more coverage. Many times you can get more coverage for the same cost. It just all depends on the situation and the policy. But there's always times to review, and I think that's at least every couple years.
Do you have any stories or experiences where you can share kind of how that's been a benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. Just for example, and we're doing a lot more policy reviews where clients are doing okay financially. They're in their retirement years. They have this old policy with some cash value built up in the policy, but they also have a huge need for long-term care. That's a huge topic. So life insurance nowadays, many companies have what they call long-term care riders, for instance. There's a lot of times where we can review a policy, we can take the existing cash in the policy, exchange it for another policy, similar death benefits, don't go down on that at all, but also add a long-term care rider on it. And all that says is if you die, there's a death benefit for your beneficiary. But if at some time during your life and that policy in force, if you need long-term care assistance, and the definition of needing long-term care assistance is not able to perform 2 out of 6 daily activities, which we can talk about later if needed. But that's essentially the company will pay a percentage of that death benefit. They'll accelerate that death benefit per month to help pay for those long-term care needs. So we're doing a lot of those policy reviews where we're taking these old policies, adding other, better benefits to them, and hopefully not spending much more money. And then we uncover that cost. Everyone's looking for, but I know I need long-term care insurance, but how do I pay for it? We're using old life insurance policies to help pay for that.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome, Eric. And I think when you do the policy review, there's kind of two things that could be uncovered. One is a missed opportunity or missing opportunity, which you've identified. Sometimes there's some serious potential risk, and maybe a policy's moving against someone. Can you maybe share like a story or something you've seen where a policy review has uncovered a policy that's not headed in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And not to pick on variable life, but I'll pick on variable life. And variable life is the performance of those policies are subject to market performance. So it's not the insurance company's performance, it's actually the market performance, sub-accounts that are in the market. There are many times that we review old variable life policies that were illustrated back in the day at 10 or 12% rates of returns. And inside of insurance contracts, that's just, it's not going to happen over the long run.
Let me raise my hand on this one. So
sure.
I think this is an important point that I don't want anybody to miss when you're explaining that. Insurance companies will illustrate, and I put that in air quotes, because when they sell a policy, there are parameters, especially around these universal life policies, that they're making guesses on. Correct?
Correct. It's all hypothetical.
Hypothetical. And so one of those guesses can be performance of the vehicle, performance of the underlying cash and the asset. And years ago, some of these software tools allowed agents to illustrate 10, 12 plus % rates of return on cash values.
Yep.
And we're seeing a lot of this, play out very dangerously later in life, when the reality was they didn't perform anywhere near that. And so people have been socking away cash value, and it is not good. Is that effectively correct? The idea of illustrations?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that is right there is probably the number one reason why you need to do policy reviews, because you could have a good policy, but you could have a policy that is in danger of lapsing. And if you let a life insurance policy lapse that has cash value, that has more cash value than what you put in to it, and clients don't know this until you review it, there could be a huge tax consequence if that policy ends up lapsing. So that's something that if you get anything out of this call, is if you have a life insurance, that's just been sitting there, review it at least a couple, every couple of years, preferably every year.
Now, we had a client that brought us an insurance policy a couple of years back, Eric, and we actually asked you to help us do a policy review on that. Eric is not just an expert in the field, but he's actually an extension of our team. And so he reviewed this policy. Do you remember that experience? And do you want to share kind of some of the details of how that played out?
I don't remember that exact one, but if I remember right, it was a whole life policy, an older whole life policy. And that policy, the client had stopped making premium payments. If this isn't it, this is a good example.
No, this is good. This is the one.
Yeah. So it's an old whole life policy. And at some point, they used to illustrate it what they called paid up policy. Okay, that's not guaranteed. There's nothing guaranteed about a paid up policy. But the client thought, hey, I could stop paying this premium, and this death benefit will be there forever. Well, the performance of the policy just didn't perform over the last 5 to 8 years, I believe. And the client was asked, hey, this policy is in danger of lapsing, or you're going to have to put in some more premiums to keep the policy in force. And that's one that we were able to save it from just lapsing, because the client was going to let it lapse, but they also had a significant taxable gain in the policy that if they let it lapse, because it had a loan on the policy as well, because it was using money in that policy to pay those premiums, then the client would have had a taxable gain on that.
And we call it phantom income because they won't even get the money; they just pay the tax.
Correct. Yeah. So don't ever let a policy lapse. Whether it's if you don't need a policy and you don't want it anymore, get with your advisor, get with Paul or Scott, and we'll look at it to see if, hey, yeah, this policy can lapse, or you can surrender this policy. There's going to be no taxable gain, and you can go on your way. But many times there could be a taxable gain, and you just need to be aware of that taxable gain. So then you know what options to go from there. And that also brings up the topic of life settlements. If you have cash value in a policy and you're older, especially if you have impaired risk, never let a policy or never surrender a policy without seeing if there is more value you can get out of that policy in what they call the secondary market. There's investors out there, professional investors, large corporations, not individuals on the street buying your policies, but there's these large funds that are buying unwanted life insurance policies, and they're paying a premium for those policies. So never let a policy lapse or surrender without seeing if that's an option as well.
Yeah, and so I always think that's a really fascinating idea. People can find really creative ways to make money, but there's a group of investors that will actually take assets, buy life insurance policies from people that have permanent policies but no longer want to maintain those premium payments, and then they can get paid rather than letting the policy lapse. Somebody else pick up the premium payments, and then they'll cash out the policy when that person passes away. I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yep, absolutely.
Eric, maybe shifting gears a little bit, and this might be a good thing to begin to kind of wrap up with, but I'm a huge life insurance advocate for those who are at stages in life where they have dependents, where they have debts and other obligations, and the loss of a loved one, as Paul mentioned, is always tragic, doubly so if one is left in a really bad situation financially. And so I look at our clients, and they have a lot of kids in their 20s and 30s, etc., who are starting out in life and whose need for life insurance is acute, and I would argue more so than even saving for retirement, because of the potential impact if tragedy strikes. For someone starting out with life insurance, is it optimal to just start out with a term policy or a combination of term and permanent? For someone in their 20s, 30s, what is the best way to start out on the life insurance front?
Without without a doubt, term insurance. I mean, term insurance is so cheap, so cheap. You know, I remember when I bought a 20-year term policy when I was 30. That was the last 20-year term policy that I bought, and I pay literally $390 a year for $1 million. I still have it today. It's about ready to expire. But I was 30 years old. I bought a 20-year term. It's $390 annual for $1 million. Super cheap. Like, don't allow, like, you know, with younger families out there, young kids, college educations, income replacement, term insurance is the way to go. And don't allow a GoFundMe page to be your insurance. Because it just doesn't happen. But it's sad. We see it all too often. Posts on Facebook, posts on whatever is, hey, you know, so-and-so passed away, you know, click on this GoFundMe account. Don't allow that to be your insurance policy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, I think everyone obviously wants to find ways to show someone they care and they love them. So those crowdfunding things exist out there. But if we're relying on that to help carry our mortgage, we're kidding ourselves. Those things are only going to, you know, go very, very, not very far at all down the road. So for our clients on the call today, you know, most of them are well beyond that stage of life, but their kids aren't, and some of their grandkids aren't, and that's the best time for them to look at term insurance is those younger people. They can afford this stuff almost for the price of skipping, you know, one lunch a month. They could buy significant coverage to help their families if something like, you know, that tragic event I explained earlier happened to them.
Yep.
Well, I think we're right at the window, Eric. We really appreciate you spending the last 30 minutes with us today and our clients to help get a better understanding of life insurance. I think what I'll say here is this: Eric is an extension of our team here at Alliance Wealth Advisors. And for anybody who's listening to this who says, gosh, maybe I should get a policy review completed, feel free to reach out to your team here at Alliance Wealth. We'll give Eric an opportunity to use his expertise to help review these policies and ensure that you are, you know, getting the most benefit out of that policy that might be sitting in a drawer somewhere. Dust it off, review it, make sure it's working for you. And in that same vein, if you've got children or grandchildren in that space of life where they want to look at term insurance, we could also have Eric reach out and get to know them and introduce some of those things. So we appreciate you again, Eric, for the time you spent with us today. And until next time, everybody on the call, we appreciate you guys spending the last 30 minutes, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.